this opportunity to thank the Morehouse School of Medicine African American Behavioral Center of Excellence. You do a phenomenal job. You provide services that are very, very important to the African American community, and you've also opened the door for training, education, and technical assistance for the LGBT community. I just want to say thank you for that. I want to thank Dawn, who's just been a tireless leader, and she's the director of the center. Corey, you've just been phenomenal in the support that you provide as technical assistance coordinator. And Kanisha, I don't know what I would do without you. She's the TTS person, and I work with her in a variety of different venues, but thank you so much. And Pamela, I don't know if you're on, but thank you for setting up the meetings and providing our calendar invites as the administrative assistants. So that's the Morehouse School of Medicine African American Behavioral Health Center of Excellence. And so we talked a little bit back, myself and Dawn, as to what the center can do to provide information, education, support, those kinds of things, not just for the African American community, but also for the same gender loving community as well. And one of the things that we said that we would do is, rather than just coming up with, we want to know what it is that you feel are important topics for us to discuss as we begin programming at Morehouse, as we begin deciding what kinds of educational programs we're going to provide for the community. But nevertheless, we have a commitment to the LGBT community to provide this services. And hence comes today's presentation, Can We Talk? Issues and Trends in the Black Same Gender Loving Community. Before we move forward, just a little bit about myself. I'm an advanced implementation specialist with the Opioid Response Network. I'm also assistant professor at Kennesaw State University part-time, as well as Capella University part-time, so several different hats. So those are my professional kinds of hats that I wear. But most importantly, I'm also an individual who's in long-term recovery. This coming August, actually, next month, we will be celebrating 30 years in recovery, and that's what I'm most proud of. And I'm also proud today, July 13th, being a member of the LGBT community for 69 years. And so, yes, today is my birthday, and I'm thankful for just being here. And so, just in terms of what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk a little bit about bisexuality, talk a little bit about health issues related to trans people. We'll talk a little bit about HIV and AIDS among Black gay men, as well as some economic issues related to HIV services. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about intersectionality and how providers can be more aware and educated about intersectionality as it relates to the LGBT community. So if you're not ready, I suggest you buckle up your seatbelts and get ready, because this is going to be a phenomenal ride. We have a very distinguished panel, and I'll introduce each panel member before they do their presentation. And first in line, the phenomenal, fantastic person. I've known this person for over 25 years. He's been inspirational. He's been a trendsetter. He's been a novelist just in terms of setting up programs. But most importantly, the thing, Craig, that most endears me to you is Second Sunday. And that was, oh my God, about 20 years ago, but it was such a phenomenal support mechanism for Black gay men. And so thank you now, and thank you for the work that you do, Craig. Just a little bit more about Craig. Craig was born in Washington, in Queens, actually, New York, and has lived in Atlanta since 1992. He is founder of Intervisions LLC. He's also co-founder of Southern Unity Movement and the Bayard Rustin Audre Lorde Breakfast. He's a writer who has written extensively on issues or on essential matters for TheBody.com, Huffington Post, the Atlanta Voice, Georgia Voice, Paz.com, and the Atlanta Magazine. He's created and or led several HIV prevention and support organizations for Black gay men, again, including the infamous, phenomenal Second Sunday. So without any further ado, Craig, come on down. Let us hear from you. Ladies and gentlemen, Craig Washington.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. Also, thank you to Morehouse School of Medicine and the African American Behavioral Health Center of Excellence. It's exciting to share this with just fellow luminaries and the wisdom here. I just want to mention that I was intentional in my introduction, in my bio. I talk about not only being born in Queens, but also being born and raised by Anna and Leon Washington. I'm intentional as a openly Black gay man who's been HIV positive for over 35 years, that I come from someone. I come from a people. And when we talk about how Black gay men are seen, not seen, valued, not valued, appreciated, understood, or not so much, it's important to remember context. We'll go to the first slide. So Black gay men, we hold multiple identities and memberships. And I say Black gay men also recognizing that gay itself is not a universal identifiers. So there are some who identify as same gender loving, or same sex attracted, or men who have sex with men, or don't identify at all in terms of sexual orientation. But certainly there are different identities that we connect with: our racial identity based on sexual orientation, age, where we land on the spectrum of femme and masculinity, and sexual identities and sexual positioning. Those are some of the identities that are carried, as well as being members of larger Black and LGBTQIA and other communities. We have a history, we have tradition, like any people. Certainly, there are luminaries that we see in leadership, from Ella Baker and Bayard Rustin. There are writers and tradition that speak to our culture, Zora Neale Hurston, to James Baldwin, to Audre Lorde, to Joseph Beam, who represented a generation of Black gay men that were literally writing and organizing for our lives. From Little Richard to Sylvester to Lil Nas X, we've been here. Our multiple identities draw interlocking oppressions. When we talk about intersectionality, that also represents the ways in which we may be targeted by racism, homophobia, transphobia, femphobia, interlocking, again, forms of oppression. It's also important to just hold up that we sit and we're in Atlanta. And while Atlanta has been long recognized as a Black Mecca, it's also the Black gay Mecca. We have one of the largest Black LGBTQIA populations in the country. Next slide, please. So we have to be recognized not only in terms of our cultural identity, right, but also we're not monolithic. And so it's important, I'm speaking certainly to providers, people that are or will be working with Black gay men, to understand and acknowledge individuality and individual expression. There's no one story around our relationships and experiences with family. It ranges, the quality of those relationships range from loving and supportive and affirming to conditional tolerance, to abuse, rejection, isolation, and physical hostility. We create those friendship circles in Black LGBTQ, and sometimes I'll interchange with queer as an umbrella term as well. Black queer community, those friendship circles often serve as family, providing that support often that we might not have gotten in our families of origin. We certainly see that over the years, there's been an increased level of visibility and acceptance But that does not eradicate or erase the homophobia that still exists, those anti-LGBTQ biases. And sometimes you see that being directed at public figures, or we experience that just, just walking down the street in a city that builds itself too busy to hate. For many of us, walking down the street to a MARTA station is an act of resistance and courage. Next slide. Black gay men do not live single issue lives. That's a reference to actually a quote by Audre Lorde. It says there's no such thing as a single issue movement because we don't lead single issue lives. AIDS was such a profound event, ongoing, but certainly in its impact, defining to a large extent Black gay man identity and other, certainly Black trans individuals hit in other populations. But it had such a disproportionate impact on Black gay men. And it also posed a significant response. So I give honor to the Rudy Carnes and the Cedric Gardners and the Tony Childs and the Duncan Teagues, a tradition of resistance and AIDS movement, Black men doing that. I want to start an organization to save my life. That's a nod to Essex Hemphill, who begins his elegiac piece around, again, self-advocacy to save my own life. Stigma and trauma, yes, that was certainly suffered by many, but certainly in terms of, again, Black gay and bisexual men who were, excuse me, stigma, we talk about AIDS stigma. It's important just to note that AIDS stigma is in many ways just a distillation of racism and homophobia and other pre-existing stigmas, and that bore to bear. What it meant was, as such a large impact, it drew resources, so much attention, and it left other needs unmet. Many of us who are working on this, if it were not for the AIDS epidemic, what kinds of work could have been done? What kinds of efforts might have been supported? Next slide. And so we come to this place in this state where there's increased meth use among, we're seeing that among, again, Black gay men. An issue that was previously, a use that was previously associated with mostly affluent white gay men, now it's more and more common among much less affluent, or, young Black gay and bisexual men living on less than enough. It's a party drug, or these are party drugs that are used for sex, and they're so readily accessible. You go on an app, people ask if they want to party, there's all kinds of codes, and so it's readily accessible, and it provides a combination of disinhibition and connection. It's a powerful lure. And what it also provides on the social, emotional tip is a sense of belonging. There were a couple of men that talked about that, what they got out of that, not only the rush of the drug or the sex, but also the connection, however fleeting that was. And that's important for those who are abused and experience rejection in their family. It's about self-medicating that trauma and numbing yourself, which is what, again, people are doing when they're faced with addiction. It also feeds easily into and reinforces other related addictions, that cycling effect. So you have the behavior, you have the morning after, so to speak, in terms of that shame about the behavior and the regret, which may lead, again, to the need to escape, the need to numb that pain and that shame. And so it self-feeds and cycles. There's also racial dynamics that must be addressed. I mentioned the shift in terms of this being primarily a phenomenon among white gay men. There are several accounts of white men who use meth to exploit and use people of color. There are directly, and there's accounts of plantation slavery role play, sexual slavery with meth acting as chain, whip, and reward. Sexualized use of the N-word. This is real, this is happening. So an extreme example of this exploitation is the case of Ed Buck. a well-heeled West Hollywood political donor who was eventually arrested and convicted of killing two Black gay men. Ed Buck was a white gay man, I think I mentioned that. Jamel Moore and Timothy Dean. Thanks to Jasmine Canick, an amazing journalist and activist who shed light on this and spoke to the racial dynamics, race and class, how Ed Buck preyed on gay men who were HIV positive and unsheltered and addicts. And if they weren't addicted to meth, that he helped them get addicted to meth. And he's the most extreme example, but there are other examples, again, of exploitation and objectification of Black, gay, and bisexual, same gender loving men through this epidemic. Next slide. Thank you. So I'm gonna just, I'm gonna do a quick time check. What's my time like? Okay.
I think about now, you probably have got about 1 more minute left.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to do it quick. I didn't hear it. Cue. Okay, so I will speak to actually Mark, and these are all fictitious names. Mark moved from New York, the New York area, to Atlanta, and found eventually that he moved actually decades ago and engaged in survival sex and sex work. By that point, he had been had experienced just being incarcerated in juvenile detention and just having a hard way to go in terms of childhood and internalized shame around his sexuality, around being poor, around just not having enough. He gets to Atlanta, is working Cypress Street, and eventually, as social media, he spoke with the advent of social media, he spoke to how easy it is to develop online hookups. He also spoke to the pattern of housing people that are addicted, getting vouchers. So if they're unhoused and they're in active addiction, they get vouchers from service providers to stay at these sites like SRO, Savannah Suites, and what have you. And he said that is disturbing because it breeds an exchange again around drug use, sex, addiction. And so people are partying in these spaces that are not supervised and there's no treatment provided. And he says that's happening right in Atlanta. So that's something for us to consider in terms of, again, some of the institutional and structural dynamics driving this. I'll leave, but just close with a couple of intervention pieces of recommendations that were shared. One for providers is, again, to assess readiness, provide safety and resources, including harm reduction resources, condoms, PrEP, clean needles, access to insurance. And this is something that Dr. Nathaniel Curry speaks to. Also, he spoke to what people that are experienced, that actually are meth users, that they talked about for their peers, having a buddy system, deciding how much you use when you dose, as practical tips and just recommendations. And I'll close there. Thank you.
Craig, thank you so much. That was just so powerful. And thank you for illuminating the names of many of our heroes in entertainment, as well as politics. Some other ones that I was thinking about when you were naming off our heroes, Raymond Simone, comedian Wanda Sykes, singer Tevin Campbell, Audre Lorde, Janet Mock, director for Pose, and it goes on, Alvin Ailey. These are all our heroes that make the LGBT community so rich. So next.
Goes back to Mom Mabley too. You can put Mom Mabley in there too.
Front and center, yes. And so we're going to go ahead and if you hear sort of like a slight buzzer, that will mean that everybody has 1 minute left. And so we want to try to keep on time so that we make sure that the audience has time to ask questions. Next, we have the phenomenal, the fantastic Malcolm, who is from the organization Thrive. And Thrive is a 501c agency that provides support and linkages to culturally affirming care for Black same-gender loving men with HIV. He also is the founder and program director of the Silver Skills Curriculum. He is also co-founder and co-director of PASAN, which is a political and social action network. He also represents County District 2 on the Fulton County HIV/AIDS Care Prevention and Advisory Committee. And so with that, we're going to bring down, and Malcolm's going to talk a little bit about HIV/AIDS trends in the Black gay community. Malcolm, come on down. It's your turn.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. A little technical check. Am I sharing my screen? Can you guys see my first slide?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to bring this into slideshow mode so I can start from the beginning. So yeah. So thank you for the introduction, Larry. Thank you to the Morehouse School of Medicine. I'm really happy to be here. As Larry mentioned, I am the director of programs for Thrive SS, and also I founded the Silver Lining Project, and part of that was the Silver Skills Curriculum. Thrive itself stands for Transforming HIV Resentments into Victories Everlasting. And you know, when you think about Essex Hemphill and wanting to start an organization to save ourselves, to save himself, it's really, really important that I shout out our founders, Larry Scott Walker, Daniel Driffin, and Dwayne Bridges, who were working in public health, who were working in organizations in the community, Aid Atlanta and other organizations. And they realized that, you know what, my brothers aren't getting what they need out of this experience. And so they started Thrive SS. Our mission is to achieve health equity for Black gay men living with HIV. And on this slide, you see Larry and Daniel, but I'll move on to the next slide. So in 2017, the Centers for Disease Control did a study. It was the first of its kind. And the studies, they wanted to know what was the expected lifetime risk of people acquiring HIV. And so, not surprisingly, they saw the numbers were higher in the South. But the real surprise, and the surprise wasn't that it was impacting Black same-gender loving men, Black men who slept with men, it was the impact was so devastating. The report said that 1 out of every 2 Black same-gender loving men would have a lifetime chance of of contracting HIV, regardless of geographic location. It didn't matter where they lived, regardless of where they lived in the country, they had a 1 in 2 chance of acquiring HIV. And that was devastating. And when we look at the numbers in Atlanta, in 2020, there were 38,140 people in the Atlanta area living with HIV, 1,254 new diagnoses in the year 2020. And when you think about the year 2020, that was during the pandemic. We look at the percentages, 80%, 80.7% of the people living with HIV, diagnosed with HIV in the Metro Atlanta area were male, 71% were Black. That translates to 27,079 Black people in the Atlanta area and 20,500 Black men who sleep with men. And so why are the numbers so high? What is it about Black same-gender loving men that is raising the numbers in our community? You know, you'll hear that, well, we're just more promiscuous than everybody else. You'll hear that, you know, our behaviors are just worse. You'll hear all types of things. We're oversexed, promiscuous. I remember when I was diagnosed with HIV, I've been living with HIV since 1997. And I remember when I was diagnosed, I was like, yeah, I kind of expected it. I knew what I was doing, you know, but the numbers, the data doesn't bear that out. So check this out. In 2017, when they did the study that said that 1 out of 2 Black same-gender loving men would acquire HIV over their life, they also took a look at Black African-American gay and bisexual men that did not have HIV, had they been having sex using condoms in the past 12 months. 17% said no. But then when you looked at all gay and bisexual men that were living without HIV, 16% of them said no. So there's really no difference there. Sexual behaviors among Black, African-American, gay, and bisexual men diagnosed with HIV in the US in 2019, all of the people with HIV that had sex without using any HIV prevention strategy in 12 months, 7%. Of the Black, African-American, gay, and bisexual men with HIV, 6%. So the numbers show that there is not much of a behavioral difference between Black same-gender loving men, Black men who sleep with men, as the rest of the community. So what could it possibly be? What could possibly be driving those numbers? So let's talk about access. Black African-American gay and bisexual men diagnosed in 44 states in 2019, 75% received some care. Only 55% were retained in care, and 62% were virally suppressed. And we see the numbers in our white counterpart, in the white community, were much higher, 85% in some area, in some studies, and a 75% viral suppression rate. And so we have to ask, what is happening here? What can we do? Yes, we have to do better. And how can we do better? So, as we said, I work for an organization called Thrive SS, and as I mentioned, Daniel Driffin, Larry Walker, and Dwayne Bridges wanted to start an organization to save ourselves. They are 3 Black gay men living with HIV. And they came up with a strategy. It's called R3. R3 stands for re-engage, retain, and reduce. Why R3? When they started R3, 19,000 people in Georgia were lost to care. The majority of those people were Black gay men. They were either lost to care because people had moved away, they had lost insurance, but in most cases it was because, they were in care, but they had a bad experience at the doctor's office. There was no trauma-informed care. There was no cultural care. There was nothing to say, hey, what's driving your behavior? What's driving the fact that you can't stay on your medication? What are the problems? They would go to the doctor and the doctor would say, take your pill and you'll be fine. But everybody couldn't be compliant. And so when we looked at R3, we said, you know what? We have to do the work to intentionally capture the individuals who were once actively in care. And we have to bring them back into care with cultural competency, trauma-informed care, and what we call Judy support. As we said, Atlanta is one of has the highest population of Black gay men and has the highest population of Black gay men living with HIV. So if you take the stigma out of it and you make sure that the guys that are living with HIV are talking to themselves, are partnering with themselves, are buddying with themselves. Hey bro, you taking your pills today? You got a doctor's appointment? When you got a doctor's appointment? Can I go to the doctor with you? Oh, you don't understand what the doctor said? Let us help you. That's what we do at Thrive. We have people who will go to the doctor with you, who will talk to you about your results, who will work to keep you in care once you're in care. We identify potential barriers that are hindering our community from accessing the care that they need so that we can thrive while living with HIV. What's the importance of reduction? We focus on keeping people in care, and we focus on reduction because we know that U equals U. Undetectable equals untransmittable. Treatment as prevention. We know that people who are in care, who are taking their medication on a regular basis, are not spreading HIV through sex or through needle or through injection drug use. And so we know that we have a path forward to defeating this disease, but we have to get the people into care and keep them in care. I hear my going off music, so I'll just say one thing. This is why R3 works. We utilize people living with HIV as peer navigators. We love on them. We treat them equally. We let them know of our struggles. We have ambassadors, employees, and members of the community that are R3 trained. We provide 24-hour peer support through our online groups on social media. And we have access to self-love and HIV acceptance programs such as the Silver Lining Project. So I'll stop there and say thank you all very much. Oh, one thing, I can't stop there. I said we had to do better. And I said that 75% of the people were receiving care and 55% were retained in care and 62 are virally suppressed. At Thrive SS, 93% are retained in care. 94% are virally suppressed. So we know R3 works, and we know loving on our members and making sure that they understand that there's no stigma and no shame, and they're not behaving in the wrong way. They're just living their lives as normal men. And that's all there is to it. Thank you all very much.